I'm Dr. Deb Butler, and you are listening to Thinner Peace and Menopause and Beyond. This is episode number 364. Welcome to Thinner Peace and Menopause and Beyond. This is Dr. Deb Butler, Master Life and Weight Coach, and as always, your coach. If you're a woman and you're smart and you're successful and you've been struggling with weight your whole life, and now menopause is making it harder than ever, and you are ready to make this the last time you ever have to go on a diet again, then this podcast is for you. Stay tuned. Well, hello, all my dear friends all over the world. Beautiful day in this neighborhood. I hope it's a beautiful day in yours too. And for those of you who are in certain parts of the world where spring is coming, I hope you're enjoying it. And I guess today it's a really special day because I have an interview that I did with one of my clients. It was probably done about 2 months ago, and I've been saving it for a time when I thought it would really, really help you. And I think today is the day. And the reason I think she is so special, her name is Kerry, is because she did a podcast with me about 2 years ago after she had finished working with me in my Thinner Peace program. And that's a beautiful interview all in itself. But as you know, if you've been listening to my podcast for a while, is some of my clients like to come back on a couple years after they've worked with me and talk about that experience, about what it's like. And Kerry is one of those clients who reached out to me to say that she would love to come back on and share her experience of what it's been like 2 years after working with me. And it was a delightful interview for me because, as usual, whenever I speak to any of you who have really put this process through your mind and body and have changed the way that you think, not just about food, but really the way that you think about everything, your whole life does kind of change. And that's exactly what happened with Kerry. And listening to her 2 years after I interviewed her the first time, and it was pretty delightful the first time too. But she's a very successful woman in her own right and in her own career. And that being said, you're going to hear some of the things that she talks about that made her want to overeat. And it's everybody is so different on why they use food. So I think in this interview, you're going to have a different perspective from a different client on why she would eat when she was not hungry. And then how she learned how to use the process and how to use her own mind management to really look at food in a different way. And when she put the way she looked at food into the category of it's more like it's just food, her whole life opened up to her. And so sit back, take a walk, whatever it is that you do as you're listening to this podcast, and listen to this second interview that I did with Kerry 2 years after her first podcast. And see if you don't glimmer some things that might help you now, no matter where you are in your process. Because no matter where you are, these things that she talks about, especially about, of course, being kind to yourself and how she uses that, is so useful. So go ahead and listen to this interview. And at the end, I'll get back on and say a few words about what I thought about it. Enjoy. Hi, Kerry. Welcome to my podcast.
Lovely to be back.
Lovely to have you. And for those people who are watching or listening, this is not your first rodeo. You have actually been here before about 2 years ago when you first finished working with me through our 12-week process. And now 2 years later, you're back because you wrote me a letter.
I did, absolutely. So it is 2 years ago to this month that I was last on the podcast after we finished working together.
And what inspired you? I mean, I think I asked you to come back a little bit earlier, and I don't know if you were ready or not, but it was an open invitation. And then I got this email from you saying, I would love to inspire your audience about where I've been and how fantastic this has been. What inspired you to want to come back and do this podcast with me again?
Well, I think that the trigger was I met a couple of friends that I
Yeah.
hadn't seen for some time. They hadn't seen me in person for well over 18 months, and I saw
Uh-huh.
them. And when I walked into the restaurant, they started laughing. And I asked them why they were laughing. And basically, they said that they wondered if I would have put the weight back on. And what they were going to say, they had agreed between themselves. They didn't know what they were going to say, whether they were going to ignore it or make a comment about it, but they were quite confident I would have put the weight back on. And I felt that was a really important message to really bring, that the work we did has been deep and long lasting. And it's not a quick fix. It's important to let the time go to do it properly. But once you're there, you really have, well, I feel you nail it. And I just think that's an important message, really.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. And there is nothing more heartwarming to me than to get that letter and to see how the work has stuck with you and even maybe progressed even more over this time that you took the work that we did and made it your own. And I guess that's what we're really here to talk about is how you did that. But not only that, how this all started, because now you look vibrant, you look happy. But I remember when we first had our conversation, you were not a happy, vibrant woman. I mean, you didn't sound like one. And so, do you want to take people back to a couple of years ago when we had our mini session and what inspired you back then to want to do this work with me?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that when we first spoke, I was just fed up with having that constant feeling of focus on my weight and on food. And I knew that it wasn't the food so much that was making me unhappy in my life. I knew that there were other things, but I knew that I was eating, I was overeating. And I felt really drained by it. For everything else that I was achieving and that was going well, this was the one bit that really I felt was sapping a lot out of me. And I had done very well listening to your podcast. So I've been listening to it for some time before
How long were you listening to my podcast before you ended up hiring me?
I reckon it was a good year, because I can remember when I found it and I was looking for a number of weight loss podcasts.
Uh-huh.
And yours was, yeah, I thought, gosh, this is me. This really is me. I can see myself here, because it wasn't really about, well, if you mix this protein and then you have a bit more carbohydrate and all the other sort of advice, which I mean, I knew I was really up to date on anything that I thought might help me. But it was, I'm still putting things in my mouth that I don't want to. I'm still eating when I know I don't need to because I'm not physically hungry. And working with the advice you gave on the podcast was so helpful. But I definitely reached a point where I thought, there is more, but I don't know I can do it by myself. I don't think I can find out how to go to that next level. And that's when I booked a mini session.
And then what inspired you to actually hire me? How did you know?
Because very quickly on the mini session, you put your finger on some points that I instinctively knew you got it. Those were right. And I found that very powerful. I liked your manner. I liked the fact that you gently challenged me when I tried to correct you. That's what I did. And you held me there and you said, are you sure? I can't remember your exact words, but
Yeah.
you made me stay with something. And that for me was really important, because I think we found early on that I had lots of emotions going around that I wasn't really looking at. And the fact that you gently held me there, even in the mini session, just to think, you just made me think. And I thought, yes, you're going to help me break through to that next level. I had no doubt then.
So you believed I could help you. And then you
Oh,
decided before you hired me, you actually believed I could help you, which is what made you hire me, is because you knew that I could help you. I think that's really
yes.
impressive about you, that you have that sense that you know that when something is right for you, that you will go for it and you will invest in it
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, it was a very quick decision once I'd spoken to you. You might remember I signed up very quickly
very
because
quickly.
I knew that this was going to be amazing. And indeed, it has been and continues to be.
Yes. And when you talk about emotions, I think that's something very important because a lot of people want to get to their emotions and know that it's an emotional thing, but they don't know how to do it by themselves. And with you, you are very, very successful in your own career and quite bright. And I think anybody just hearing you talk can see that. And yet, I knew how smart you were and how successful you were. And I also could see how you absolutely kind of walled off yourself from your own emotions, which is why you were eating to begin with, is because of that.
Absolutely. We did some really, really interesting work in
Very
you even
interesting.
helping me feel those emotions because I didn't
Yeah.
even know they were there, really, did I? We had to
No.
find them. And I remember being taken really quite aback by some of the things that we uncovered. And I couldn't believe that some of the emotions I had buried were still running my life in my 50s. I don't know, they were things that people said to me, weren't they, when I was younger, or the way I felt that my relationship with my mother was, which you helped me look at it in a completely different light. And I had never had that. I'd had the same story running through my mind all my life about something. And we had one session where something my mother had said to me, you completely turned it on its head. And it was massive for me because I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know you could take a feeling, an emotion which had been pushed down, bring it up, have a look at it, and then move on so quickly, really.
Yeah. And I think what I want to say about that, because it's really different from therapy, because it's not like we went back and relived anything. But what we did do is you were just telling me in the present moment what you were thinking, what your thoughts were about what happened in the past. And the thoughts that you were thinking in the present moment were getting in the way of you living in the present moment. So when you talk about turning it around, I helped you turn the way you looked at it.
The facts, what happened was exactly the same, but you helped me see it in a different way and to see that what I thought was an absolute fact, it wasn't. It was an interpretation, one of many different interpretations you could have had about a situation.
And I think what was so amazing about that is number one, for you, is that you have the wherewithal to let yourself go through that. But also for people that are listening, is that when we're talking about thoughts in the present moment, it's not as painful. It's just like, oh my gosh, I don't have to think that anymore. That's really all it really was, is I don't have to think that anymore. I could think something that can make me feel a lot better about that and believe it just as much.
Absolutely. And that's what it was. It was thinking about it and believing something differently. And that was such a shift, a change for me.
It
I'm
was the
very,
beginning of opening up some emotions and feeling emotions. And then I think for you is that you realized that you could feel them
I could feel them and not be frightened about
and
it.
not be frightened about it.
But the first few times we went through emotions, it wasn't frightening because you metaphorically held my hand, but it was somewhere that I wouldn't have gone by myself. But I soon realized I learned to do it quite quickly. And so to be able to process those emotions was wonderful for me. And it did mean that I could look at other situations and realize that if I just sat still with that emotion, it would often just pass through me and then it would be okay. And actually, it wasn't going to do anything where I was now in the present moment. I honestly didn't really know that until we started working together.
And how did that change your relationship with food? Because that's what I think the big question is. How did that help?
Food lost its almost magic ability to jump up off the plate or the packet and into my mouth. I think before we started working together, I honestly felt quite helpless sometimes around food, as in, I'd done a lot of work on controlling my environment, not having the food there, so I couldn't eat it, or, not cooking things for the children that I would want to eat, all those things. But when I realized that I really didn't like the taste, or I didn't want the taste of that food, it was because of something else I was looking to eat it. Because I sort of taught myself, that's how it had happened, that I would eat to make myself feel better. And when I realized that I could just sit with that feeling, and actually food really had nothing to do with it, nothing to do with it at all. And most of the time, it didn't make me feel better. In fact, when I stopped eating, I would think, oh, I feel physically horrible. But it really allowed me to know that it wasn't the food I was eating because I was trying to sort of suppress some emotion. And that's what I had learnt to do. And one of the things that we really uncovered was I ate for things that many people would think were happy things. So every time I got praised, I would eat. And actually, I had some work I had some work situations where my boss was so pleased with the work I'd done. And I remember running straight out and buying a big packet of chocolate because I felt I couldn't cope with the acceptance. Whereas now it's completely different. I can just acknowledge it. And that's what
You
it
can
is.
feel it. You can feel the praise. When you can't feel negative emotion, it's really hard to feel positive emotion too.
Absolutely. But to be able to feel the praise and just
Yeah.
sit there with it and appreciate it. And then that's it, really.
Oh my gosh. It warms my heart. I'm remembering our sessions. For people who are watching this or listening to this, I think the reason that it's worked so well for you is because you also did the work. Anything I asked you to do, I had no doubt that it would be done when I talked to you again.
You're making a big investment in yourself. And I absolutely was going to do the work because of that. But it wasn't like I was genuinely intrigued. I really enjoyed working with you. I knew that I would get out what I put in. And I knew the process would work, actually. I really did know it would work, which made it a no-brainer for me to join in and do it.
Yeah, it's a great thought to have that I would hope anybody that decides to work with me would know that it would work because that is part of why it works.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So that is our 12-week process 2 years ago that I forget, like how much weight did you lose then?
It wasn't the 20 pounds in the 12 weeks, but within that time and doing the first podcast. And then, yes, it's about another 6 pounds from there.
Yeah. And that's what you said. You're kind of gently still, as you continue doing the exact same process, your body is kind of losing a little bit of weight here and there at the same time. What is it like for you 2 years later? How do you feel now around food and eating and social situations and being with your friends when they have a bet that will she or will she not gain her weight back? What's it like for you now, 2 years later?
It's an immense sense of freedom because I don't really think about food in any other way than what I want as nourishment. And I just look at food as to what I would like to eat. And it's really no more than that. It's just so much headspace that's freed up by not thinking about food all the time. That's another thing, wondering if I'm hungry. I now know when I'm hungry.
And do you now know when you're full?
And I now know when I'm full. And that, of course, is the crux of everything, really, isn't it? But it took me a while to learn to feel hungry and to know when I was full. And now I do. And I probably slightly do -3 and +3 a bit more.
Oh, you kind of shifted your numbers just a little bit.
Yes, I've
Uh-huh.
just shifted it a little bit
Uh-huh.
more. I think I've
Uh-huh.
got more confidence to be a little bit more hungry sometimes and know it's okay. It's okay to be a bit hungry.
Uh-huh.
It's good to carry something with me if I've got a long gap between meals with working, but actually it's also okay to get a bit hungry and then to sit down and eat a good meal that you've prepared or someone's prepared for you that's nutritious. And I'm not frightened of being hungry. So
Oh, that's a big thing to talk about. I forgot about that in the beginning. You were very, very frightened of going hungry.
I was
I
because I
remember
think,
that now.
yeah, I think because, like a lot of people, I was always trying to take on the latest advice. And some of that advice was, keep your blood sugar levels high and eat very little, but very often. And I think I had trained myself to the point where I never really got hungry because I was always,
Mhm.
whether my body said I need food or not, it was like, well, I think it's 2.5 hours since I've last eaten. I must eat something. And it took us a while to unpick what hunger really is. And actually, I'm now just not frightened to get a bit hungry. If I'm going to miss a meal because life happens and it hasn't been the perfect day of planning, it's not like I know I'll be fine. I know that I will still function very well. And all that will happen is my stomach will rumble. That's it.
Even more important, do you know when you're full? And is it easy
Yeah,
to eat when you're hungry and stop when you're full?
very easy. And I also can say to people now, which I couldn't at first, if I'm offered a piece of birthday cake,
Yes, I remember.
and I can say, oh, not at the moment, thank you, or thank you, but no, thank you. And actually,
That was a big thing for you.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I was brought up to, like many people, many women, please other people
Yes.
first. And to be able to sort of say, no, I'm fine, thank you. Or to go out with friends to a restaurant, say, you know what, I'm fine with just a starter. I don't need 3 courses. And actually, very rarely did people say anything. I thought people would be, offended if I didn't eat a piece of birthday cake or, a friend's birthday and we're at the restaurant and I'm just having, soup or something. But nobody really ever minded. So there you go.
I know. And in your mind, you go, oh boy, who knows what's going to happen and what they're going to think of me if I don't eat. You're always worried about what other people were thinking. And they were more worried about what's going on for them than what was going on for you.
Absolutely. Yeah,
But I also think it's important to note that even if they did mind, is that okay too?
absolutely. That's okay. And that happens more with drinking. I think, the food and the drink go together for me.
Yeah.
And it was exactly the same if you went out and somebody wanted you to have another glass of wine, and it would be, no, 1 glass of wine is what I want and I've really enjoyed. People, I felt, put a bit more pressure on, oh, have another one. But no, I was absolutely, no, I'm only having one because I know that that's what I'll enjoy and feel good with. If we add another one on or another two, it's not going to be what I want. So no, no, thank you.
And for people who are listening to you sound so calm and gracious right now, it
Hmm.
sounds so easy. That was extremely difficult for you.
Absolutely. It was extremely difficult. I used to practice saying it in the bathroom mirror. No, that's fine. I'm fine. Thank you. Or I've had enough. Thank you. Yeah, I used to practice it.
I love that. And so it sounds to me like where you have come from, it's more important almost to please yourself first. Like, what does Kerry want? What does Kerry need?
Entirely. I mean, I think that's the biggest takeaway really was to put myself first. And that was my sort of compelling reason for looking and working with you. I remember our first session.
Yes.
Why do you want to do this? And me first was my reason. And, I felt I'd spent a lot of time with my children, my parents, and actually I really wanted to do this for myself.
I love that. So, for those people who are looking for a compelling reason, yours was very, very simple, but it's something that you could say very easily. Remember, is me first.
Absolutely. And I think
because
that
you
has
didn't put
continued.
yourself first.
Yes.
Well, Miss Kerry, please, what would you say to anybody that it's been 2 years now and the process that you went through 2 years ago was amazing? But I have to tell you to talk to you now and see you and also see how solidified all of this is for you. How would you inspire somebody who's out there? Because I think you were inspired by listening to somebody else speak when you first decided to work with me, that you had heard another interview.
Yeah, absolutely. I was inspired by the other women I heard because I felt so many of them were like me. They were saying the things that I felt, and I was inspired by them. And I think I would say to people, the work that we did together, it goes on and it deepens. So when you talk about the people pleasing and everything we uncovered there, it has an impact in so many other areas of your life. So you come to you to lose the weight because that's why you're seeking support. But actually, there are so many other benefits and it does get stronger. And actually, I've paid back my investment so many times over because of the way I've been able to apply the principles that we've been through in my working life as well. And that has been quite magical, really, to be able to do that. So I would say it's a really good time, that sort of midlife corridor, if you like, to actually look at your thinking, look what's in your mind, to really work with someone as talented as you are to help lift the bonnet on everything and have a look. And I wouldn't hesitate. I really would do it in a flash again. And actually, I'm almost excited for people who haven't done the work yet because I'm excited for them in what they might find and the benefits and how it will change their life. So definitely, I would say, do it. Just do it. There was also the other bit was the work we did on the body connection. I think that it's easy to lose connection with your body when you spend years not fighting against it, but trying to control things in a way you don't have to. So after the work we did together, I was getting more connection in terms of, knowing when I was hungry, but it was other things. It was like my body was telling me when it was tired, when it was ill, and all those things that I hadn't really been listening to. And I was able to really feel that. And I did some great things, actually. I hadn't ridden since I was a child, horses. And I was able to do that to a point where when I was a little girl, I always wanted to gallop with a giraffe. So I spent a year getting my riding up to date, lots of hard work. I went to Kenya and I galloped with a giraffe. I went on a riding safari. But I wouldn't have done that unless we did the work we did together.
Kerry, it was such a pleasure to see you again and to have you back on the podcast. And you make me so proud, not only of you, but of myself, because seeing you, there's a certain amount of work I had to do to get to the point where I could do this work.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I did it because I wanted to hear and help people as you have just spoken about. That's what I wanted to be able to do. And to hear it come back like that, it warms my heart and it makes me feel like I'm at the right place doing the right thing. And I just thank you from the bottom of my heart. I loved every minute of working with you. And this is why I do the work. So thank you, Kerry, so much.
Well, thank you as well. And I'm so glad that you're doing the work you're doing.
Bye bye, Kerry.
Bye-bye.
Well, that was my second interview with Kerry, and she did not disappoint. I know. And she is quite the eloquent speaker, I think. She has a wonderful way of explaining how things are for her. Didn't you think so? But what I wanted to share with you, because we might have cut it out in the podcast, because she started telling me all of these things about what's going on in her life after the podcast was over. And I said, oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't put this in the podcast. So I'm just going to tell you some of the things that she told me, just so you know that when this isn't a priority anymore about you, your body, and what you're going to eat and what you're not going to eat, and either tearing yourself down for not doing it or building yourself up because the scale went down, but going through the cycle over and over when it's over. And that's really what she was talking about to me when we actually ended the podcast, about that. One of the things that she never does anymore is she doesn't think about it. And what she said is that because she's not thinking about eating so much and about what's wrong and what's right with her and her body and food, her brain opened up to other things. So she shared with me she's doing new things in her business than she ever did before. It's like her brain opened up to what does she want to do in her career. And we did talk about that when I was coaching her. Her career came up. And 2 years later, it is so awesome to hear what she's doing with it, because it's not the same as it was when we were working. She was playing with it. And boy, she had more space in her brain, because she wasn't continually thinking about the same thing over and over and over again when it came to food. And she said that a few times that, she doesn't think about it anymore, not like that. And the other thing that she shared, not only is her career going a little bit in a different direction, not only is she probably making more money than she ever made before, she also decided to want to go back and to ride horses. And so she started that up again. And she actually went to Africa. I wish she would have put this in the podcast and told you, but she told me. And she went and rode giraffes, not horses, giraffes. She said it was the most exciting time of her life. What? She's in her mid 50s and life is just getting more and more exciting. And it all started because she started looking at why she was eating when she was not hungry, and went through the thinner peace process with me, which is really looking at everything, why you eat when you're not hungry, but also to realize that if you can figure out why you're eating when you're not hungry, and you can learn how to manage that in your mind, as Kerry did, well, I don't know if you're going to be riding giraffes in Africa or what you're going to be doing, if you're going to be changing your whole career or changing your whole business just because you learned how to manage your mind around food. But I'll tell you what, once you see one thing, you will see many things. And that's what happened to her. And 2 years later, it's morphing even more. So exciting to hear this for her. Is that I thought it was an amazing podcast 2 years ago on her growth, but letting that growth sit is really even more amazing to hear about it now, is to what she did with it when she had all that space left over in her brain and she could really dream about what else she wanted. So I don't know if you're going to be riding giraffes or what you want to do that you're not doing, but wouldn't you like to find out why you're eating when you're not hungry? Opens up so much stuff. And, I call my process the thinner peace process because I don't want to just help you lose weight. I want to help you learn to become more peaceful in your mind, body, and spirit. And that's what this process is all about. And that's what it did for Kerry. And if that's something that you want, well, listen, you know what? You know what to do if you want to learn how to work with me. And if not, I just want you to know that the world is your oyster. Once you learn how to manage your mind, if food is the problem, your mind is the solution, because food was really never the problem. It was always in your mind. And when you can correct what's going on in your mind, well, world is your oyster. So listen, before I end, no matter where you go and no matter what else you do and no matter who else you're with, the only way to really create this peace that I'm talking about always starts with being kind to yourself. So please, please, please be kind to yourself. And I will see you next week. Bye bye. If you're loving my podcast and you would like some more information to be able to follow along with, then please go to drdebbutler.com/change and you can get a free copy of my companion book that goes with this podcast that I refer to in many different episodes. That is drdebbutler.com/change. CHANGE.